All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. We are on the eve of one of the biggest days on the sports calendar for the year. And of course, I'm talking about the Final Four of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Just four teams left, folks. Wasn't that long ago that we started with 68. Now we're down to four. But with that said, who has what it takes to cut down the nets on Monday night in Indianapolis? And of course, how did we get here? You look at this Final Four, and we've got some heavyweights in this quartet right here. Yeah, you've got two ones, you've got a two, and you got a three, but don't overlook the two in Connecticut and don't overlook the three in Illinois because all four of these teams have what it takes to cut down the nets on Monday night. All four of these teams have been four of the better teams in college basketball all season long. And with that said, I think that we are in for three very exciting and three very good games at Lucas Oil Stadium this weekend. Now, the first game, of course, is going to be with a three seed Illinois out of the South region taking on the two seed Connecticut. And of course, before I get into that, we've got two Big Ten teams in this Final Four, and I think it's only fitting this year to have a pair of Big Ten teams in this Final Four because you're basically in Big Ten country in Indiana. But nonetheless, the Illini. Okay. This is their first trip to the Final Four in 21 years. And of course, if anybody remembers those that fighting Illini team, they were led by their guards, Darren Williams, D. Brown, and of course Luther Head. They made it all the way to the championship game, lost to North Carolina. That was one of their only two losses on that season. But nonetheless, for Brad Underwood and company, after losing their opener in the Big Ten Conference tournament to Wisconsin, they have looked like a very different team in this NCAA tournament. I mean, Illinois has steamrolled everybody. They beat Penn in the first round by 35. They beat VCU in the second round by 21. They went into Houston's backyard and beat them by 10 points. And honestly, the final score of that game was really not indicative as far as how the Illini dominated the Cougars. And then, of course, what we saw Illinois do last Saturday to Iowa in the South Regional Championship game. For me, I'm looking at some keys for this game for the Illini. And, of course, Illinois has a big front line, but I want to start with their backcourt with guard Keaton Wegler, one of the best players in the Big Ten, and UConn is going to have all eyes on him for this contest. But then you look at the likes of David Mirkovich and, of course, Andrei Stojakovic, the son of NBA legend Peja Stojakovic. Can they do what they do from the outside in this game against Connecticut? Then, for me, one big matchup, no pun intended, that I'm looking at the Ivisic brothers for Illinois going up against Terrace Reed for Connecticut. That's going to be a big matchup right there. Can Reed get them in foul trouble, or can the two twins get the UConn big man in foul trouble? We gotta wait. We have to wait and see what happens on that one. On the flip side for Connecticut, to me, Connecticut is a very intriguing team. Of course, we know UConn went back to back in 2023 and 2024. This team this year, they have been one of the top teams in college basketball. Make no mistake about it. Connecticut, they came out like gangbusters in the first half of this year. You think about some of the teams that UConn beat. They beat BYU. They beat Illinois at Madison Square Garden. They beat Kansas. They beat Florida. They beat Texas. Okay, and before they got into Big East play, and of course they finished second in the Big East to St. John's, both in the regular season and the Big East tournament. But nonetheless, very intriguing for me for Connecticut because UConn is in the Final Four. And I know some people are going, with what I'm about to say, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy, but the Huskies have really not played well. Okay. And I say this because you go back to this tournament, UConn has yet to play a 40-minute game. And the reason why I say that, they have not been able to put it together. They put it together in spurts. They got tested in the first round against Furman, the 15 seed. That final score was not indicative of how close that game was for the bulk of it. UConn got tested in the second round against UCLA. Again, that game was the final score was not indicative of how close that contest was. The Huskies came out like gangbusters in the first half last Friday night against Michigan State, and then they had to hold off and hold on in the second half. And of course, we know the furious comeback that UConn made late to rally to knock off Duke. I would imagine at some point, UConn is going to be able to put it all together, and they're going to have to put it all together at some point for a full 40 minutes if they want to go out there and win a national title. One thing for me, and I said this after they knocked off Duke, where would Connecticut be in this tournament without Terrace Reed? You're talking about a guy who was averaging nearly 22 points per game, 13 and a half rebounds, and he's been a one-man gang. He is playing like an old school big man, close to the basket, not forcing things. He's also facilitating for his teammates. And you know what? He has so many moves in the post. He'd make a guy like Zach Randolph proud. So again, I talked about that matchup with Terrace Reed going up against the Ivicic brothers. That is going to be very important. Which side wins that one? A homecoming, of course, for Braylon Mullins. And of course, like I said, after Braylon Mullins made that big shot to come back against Duke, you know, he's the Indiana kid. Can he make a bigger play than he did in the regional final against Duke? We're going to have to wait and see. But I think the youngster who already has a boatload of confidence is just going to have some more going into this game. A guy like Alex Karaban, you know, he's a basketball player's basketball player. And I think he embodies this UConn team under Dan Hurley. He's not afraid of the big moment, and he's also selfless, okay? And Alex Karaban has never met a big shot that he did not like. Solo ball, after struggling towards the end of the regular season, throughout the Big East tournament and early on in this NCAA tournament, he appears like he is starting to get his shot back. And of course, Connecticut getting Silas Demry back into rhythm after that ankle injury that he suffered in the Big Ten championship game, or pardon me, the Big East championship game against St. John's. This is going to be a very closely contested game. And for me, both of these teams met in the regular season at the Garden. That was back in November. So we're talking about more than 4 months ago. A lot has changed for both of these teams since then. Yeah, you can go back and look at that film. But nonetheless, you still got to look at things because both of these squads are different. But nonetheless, I think it comes down to momentum, runs, and of course, the coaching. Brad Underwood against Dan Hurley. And, you know, love him or hate him, Dan Hurley knows how to have his team ready for the big game on the big stage. And another thing for me with Illinois, okay, and I'm not trying to disrespect them here, we have yet to see a team win the national championship after losing their conference tournament opener. And that is something that Illinois is going up against. I don't see them bucking the trend. I like Connecticut to advance to Monday night by the score of 74-71. And then, of course, the nightcap in Indianapolis, and it's a battle of number ones. Two teams that have been among the best in college basketball all season long. I'm talking about the one seed, the Michigan Wolverines, coming out of the Midwest region, taking on the West regional champions in the one seed, the Arizona Wildcats. And very interesting concepts for this game for both of these schools. Michigan, the last time they won the national championship was 1989. When they won it, there was another Big Ten school in the Final Four with them, and that was the Illini. And of course, the Illini took on a Big East team in the national semifinal. No, I take that back. Excuse me. Michigan faced Illinois in the national final that year, national semifinal, and the other one was Seton Hall and Duke. But nonetheless, Arizona. This is their first trip to the Final Four. Hard to believe, okay? But this is Arizona's first trip to the Final Four since 2001, and they last won it in 1997 their only championship in men's basketball in school history. And of course, it came at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis as they knocked off Kentucky. But nonetheless, there are some people who look at this game and feel like this national title game right here, or pardon me, this could be the national title game between the Wolverines and the Wildcats. Of course, both are the only one seeds to make it to Indianapolis, and like I said, they've been two of the best teams in college basketball all season long. You look at Michigan, and they've been steamrolling for the most part all season. Okay, the Wolverines have only lost 3 games, but really in this tournament, and getting back to Connecticut real quick, Connecticut is out of all 4 of these teams, they're the only ones who've really had to work for their victories in this tournament. Michigan beat Howard by 21 in the first round. Of course, they put up 101 on the Bison. They knocked off St. Louis by 23 in round two. They beat Alabama by 13 in the Sweet 16. And then, of course, they dominated Tennessee on Sunday afternoon to get to the Final Four. And, of course, Michigan has scored at least 90 points in all 4 of their games. You cannot say enough about the job that Dusty May has done in a very short period of time in Ann Arbor. Just took him 2 years to get the Wolverines back to the Final Four. You think about the size of this Michigan front line. Of course, Ade Maurer in the middle. You got Morris Johnson Jr. And then, of course, Lendenborg as well at the other forward. So I'm looking at them, and then this backcourt play for Michigan with Elliot Cadeau and Trey McKinney. On the flip side for the Wildcats, I think Arizona just got a huge boost due to the fact that Tommy Lloyd signed his extension, and he is going to be staying in Arizona because, like I said, that's not going to be a distraction right now for the Wildcats as they get ready to prep for this big game. And of course, the job that Tommy Lloyd has done for this Arizona program, the dominance that the Wildcats had when they were still in the Pac 12, and then, of course, the transition period now for them to the Big 12. But nonetheless, um, Arizona has taken care of their business throughout this NCAA tournament, like Michigan. And honestly, Arizona has taken care of their business all season long. Outside of midseason losses, they were consecutive losses. First on the road in Lawrence against Kansas, which is never an easy place for an opponent to play. And then they followed that up with a home loss against Texas Tech. But that's it. That's the only defeat that the Wildcats have tasted all season long. And speaking of steamrolling, that's what Arizona's been doing in this tournament. They beat LIU in the first round by 34. They knocked off a very good Utah State team in the second round by 12. They And one of the shockers of this tournament so far, they had their way with Arkansas in the Sweet 16, and then, of course, how they took over in the second half against Purdue. One thing I've seen about Arizona, with the exception of the game against Long Island, all of their games in this tournament, they started slow and they've picked it up. And I think they have made great adjustments come the second half. And, I give credit to Michigan's front line. Arizona's no slouches. They don't have slouches on their front line either. You think about what a guy like Koa Pete, the freshman, has been doing. You think about Mateus Krivas and, of course, even Karchenkov, what he has been able to do as well. Braden Burry's one of the better players in college basketball. Definitely going to be a top 10 pick in this draft, in my opinion. So this is an old school pay-per-view type, matchup right here. Two heavyweights. And it's going to come down to which team blinks. Dusty May against Tommy Lloyd. Two phenomenal head coaches. Again, we saw what Dusty May did at Florida Atlantic, and now he's doing it at Michigan. And of course, with what Tommy Lloyd is doing at Arizona. One of these head coaches' lives is about to change in about 24 hours because one of them is going to be one game away from claiming a national championship. I think this game is going to come down to which team is able to knock down their perimeter shots, as well as which team's big men are going to stay out of foul trouble, and of course, the turnover issue. Both of these teams can get up and down the floor and score, but they can both play D. And I think whoever plays D the best in this game is going to win. And I like Arizona to get to the championship game on Monday night by the score of 73 to 70. So, folks, those are my picks for tomorrow night's national semifinals. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw in this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it will be my pleasure to do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely be sure to check out the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for checking out Pawns of Sports Knowledge Podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.